us. Thank you for your time and for joining us again on this month of March SkyConnect Dialogues. Ladies and gentlemen, today my guest is Mr. Roger Page Morrison. Page Morris is the Regional Sales Director for Africa at Aselia, a technology service provider to the aviation industry. And I'm sure some of you in your previous lives might have interacted with Roger. And today, Roger and I are here to get into some discussions regarding, as always, on some aspects of the business that will be of interest to the aviation community. In this edition of SkyConnect, ladies and gentlemen, Roger and I would actually be discussing matters pertaining to the state of the industry, technology evolution in the aviation space, and how we can keep up with the trends as African airlines. And this will be quite important for all of us here to know what it is that we need to look up to so that we can be on top of technology going forward. We're also going to look at where lies the African advantage when it comes to technology and what can we be doing with our competitive edge in this area. And we would further explore Acelia's activities on the continent and how they are impacting the aviation business. And finally, we would not let him go until he has told us how Aselia and Afra are going to partner to enhance the aviation space on the African continent. Then we round up with the final thought from Mr. Page Morris. Welcome, and as usual, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion at some point in as we go along. You can either send us your questions on the Q&A tab and I will pick them up as we go along, or if there are comments, you put them in the chat box, and as always, I will pick them up and get Page Morris to respond to them appropriately. Ladies and gentlemen, also note that this session is going to run for 1 hour. At least we schedule it for 45 minutes, but it can overrun to the next hour. And we would then stop at that point. So if unfortunately we are unable to address your questions or all your concerns before this time, we would find an appropriate forum where we can address them directly with you. So welcome once again, and ladies and gentlemen, your guest today, Roger Page Morris. Mr. Morris, you're welcome.
Hi, Raphael. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. As you mentioned, I'm the Regional Director for the Sales and Account Manager at Accelya. It's a job I've been doing for the last 15 odd years. I've been working in the travel industry for over 25 years. So way back when I started in the BA Executive Club, so doing my stint there before moving into the BSP and IATA worlds, and then moving into current role with Accelya, looking after Africa in particular, but also some other areas around the globe. So I've learned a lot. It's particularly nice to be involved in my home continent, having been born in Kenya and raised there prior to moving to the UK. So it's always good to get back to the homeland, as it were. In my time at Accelya, I've had the fortune to work closely with a lot of airlines from different areas. I have looked after a lot of the Middle Eastern carriers in my time, and way back in the early days, getting involved in the US carriers. So it's given me a fairly good global view of the industry and where areas we can look at. And then with Accelya and the growth that Accelya has experienced in the last 10 years, I mean, it's exposed me to a full circle of products from the financial side to the commercial side, and particularly now with the integration with Farelogix a couple of years ago, we're particularly seeing the full scope of products available to the airlines. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to have a chat and answer any questions as they come through.
Great, thank you so much. How would you rate working in Africa compared to working elsewhere in your previous life?
It's very different. It's very different. I'm lucky that I was born there, so I understand a lot of the intricacies. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's challenging in some aspects in terms of you know, technology there and the politics and the distances involved. But it's I would say it's my favorite continent to work on. There's a lot of potential and a lot of great people working there.
Great. Talking about potential, let me pick it from there as we set our discussion going. Africa, lots of potential. Before, up until 2019, there was so much optimism, and the pace of growth of the industry in Africa was excellent, and there was so much going for African aviation. Then COVID hit. Now, what would you say is the impact of COVID in your experience on the industry, not just in Africa, but globally?
So the impact, I mean, obviously, I mean, it's been well documented. The COVID shattered the economies of pretty much most of the world. I think the losses in Africa have been quoted at over $10 billion in 2020. Some are saying as high as 14 billion in the airline industry. So, you know, it's huge financial losses, and obviously in Africa in particular, you were struggling to get profit there in the first place. So, you know, you have the impact there, and then the governments were struggling as well. So then looking at the financial bailouts were not as possible there as the rest of the world. You had the fleets were grounded, planes were not flying. So it's, you know, most areas saw at least a 60% drop in passenger numbers, which in any industry would be a massive impact. But in the airline industry, that's your sole income in a lot of the cases.
Yeah, but it seems like there seems to be some optimism, especially in 2022. We all are very hopeful that things will turn for the better.
Well, I think you've seen a massive kickback already in terms of the carriers. A lot of the European carriers have seen at least 70% passenger volumes compared to 2019. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the smaller carriers that are doing specific regional and local routes are seeing higher volumes now than in 2019. So the passengers are flying again. I mean, obviously now in the last week, we've had another drop back in terms of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which obviously is going to have a further impact. But hopefully the strength is there, and you know, the airlines are now looking at getting the projects that were on hold back in place. We're seeing a huge amount of interest from carriers coming back to us in terms of reigniting projects that were put prior to COVID. We're seeing a huge amount of resources being re-employed by the airlines. You know, so there is a huge interest in getting back in the air, and you know, the passengers are there and they are willing to fly. And you know, a lot of the European area and in parts of the Middle East, it's actually quicker than the airlines anticipated, and it's hit them a little bit, so they get their systems back in place and get everything all in place. But it's good to see that, and you know, but what we are seeing, and obviously with the impact of COVID, is a shift in how the airlines are coming back, and they're obviously looking at the digital retailing, the e-commerce side of it, much more than just purely flying passengers now. I mean, over COVID, they saw the impact of how Amazon increased, and so they're looking at how that aspect of it. So the airlines are looking outside the traditional travel concept, and they see they see that as the next stage, and they see that as getting very important in an environment where the customer is getting ever more demanding and insistent on greater ticketing flexibility, you know, instant refunds. I mean, the issues the airlines had with refunds at the beginning of COVID really highlighted how they needed to streamline that sort of area.
But that's interesting that we're seeing so much optimism, but as someone put it nicely yesterday to me, he said, the world spent billions of dollars, trillions of dollars fighting COVID-19. And after that seems to be going down, then we set up to kill ourselves in Russia and that region. What is happening? Is 2022 going to be a very stable year for the industry?
I think, yeah, I mean, it's a shame because, I mean, obviously we saw the growth coming back at the beginning of this year, and now obviously areas that are close to the conflict are starting to put brakes on some of the projects to see how this evolves. I mean, I think Africa had some very good routes up into Eastern Europe at the time, and I think that's impacting a lot of the African carriers now. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a question of wait and see what happens in the next week, unfortunately, because no one can predict what Putin will do.
Yeah, but talking about technology in this industry, since your work or your company leans more towards the technology side of helping this industry out, where would you place Africa and African air transport in the technology space? Do you think, are we there? Are we yet to get there, or are we below
there? I think, you know, obviously Africa has some restrictions. I mean, obviously technology, if you're using the latest technology, is costly. So some technology may be out of reach, but I think, you know, what Africa has that the rest of the world didn't is they're starting later on, as it were. A lot of the European and American carriers, and even some of the Middle Eastern ones, have very old legacy systems that they're now trying to change. And you know, now that the African carriers can start looking at sort of bypassing that and getting to the latest technology quicker, and using innovation. I mean, if we look at even things like M-Pesa in Kenya, which is the mobile payment system, I mean, that is streets ahead of where the other nations were at that point. And, you know, with the move more towards technology on a mobile and the app being king, as it were, getting direct access to the customers, this is where Africa has an advantage if they can utilize that.
Yeah, and now payment platforms are springing up all over Africa, and Africa is actually moving very fast in adopting electronic payment platforms like the M-Pesa you just mentioned. Now, is there a more efficient way airlines can actually adopt this technology, or they are doing that already?
I think they're doing it. I mean, you have a lot of payment gateways and acquirers that are getting involved in this now. I mean, obviously, we have some issues in obviously the credibility of you know, the financial credibility side of things. You know, some of the banks are moving away from the travel industry over the last couple of years because of COVID and the risk that is involved there. But the technology is there, and you know, there are a lot of enhancements around how to pay for your tickets, in ensuring, you know, that the airlines get the best rates, etc. So there is technology out there to allow the shift to acquirers and that side of it. So it is there, and I think Africa is using it. The restriction that I suppose Africa has is the getting the banks to work with the African carriers. And that has been a challenge in some parts of Africa.
Yes, indeed, there's actually a gap between the banks and the airlines in terms of access to resources and also in terms of acceptance of or integration of some of these technologies directly into the banking system. And I'm sure as we move along, probably as confidence grows, we might have that changing. But talking about technology in Africa, I just want to check with you, how can African airlines keep up with the trends? It looks like new technologies are coming up very regularly. Africa seems just to be tagging along because it involves a lot of resources, involves a lot of capacity building, it requires a lot of system adjustments. Now, how can African airlines adjust to emerging technologies?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think, I think all emerging technologies is costly to be at the front. I mean, but if you can invest it up front, the rewards can be significant. The key is to obviously have the very robust business plans to be able to see the benefits, to ensure that you have the investment up front in the right projects at the right time. And I think the challenge is really not to look at the heavy projects, maybe start looking at innovation projects, things that potentially will improve the African profitability. Things that will, the biggest trend in the industry in 2022 is going to be around user experience and making the traveler feel confident to travel. So that the airlines have multiple touch points with the customers. So if you can improve all of these, you're going to improve the customer experience, you're going to improve loyalty, the customer's going to continue to travel with you. So, improving your current services, it doesn't have to be hugely invested upfront. So make sure you have the good revenue assurance and revenue integrity, even as simple things as revenue accounting, ensure that is up to scratch. Utilizing the vendors who have invested heavily in technology, you can sort of distribute the cost amongst the airlines, as it were. So the vendors can take the cost and then pass the technology on to the airlines. The key thing, I think, is really to create loyalty with the customers. I mean, looking at technology trends in the future, even things I think in Africa that probably needs to be looked at is fuel costs. Fuel costs in Africa are huge. If there's a way that you can maintain or lower that, then that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, you're talking about using vendors that have the resources, but increasingly airlines are beginning to want to take control of their inventory more and more. Yes. Now, how do you reconcile that? And they're getting technologies that can help them be more in control of their inventory rather than leave their inventory in the hands of vendors whose loyalty they cannot necessarily rely on for longer.
Yeah, okay. I mean, using technology is for two reasons. You're either cost cutting or you're improving the customer experience. So, if you're cost cutting, bringing it in-house is an option, but then you have to invest in the technology. So the airline then has to invest in that. And let's look, all airlines have a huge amount of information already within their systems. So you don't have to use the vendors as an outsource. You can use the technology that they provide. You're looking at things like NDC now. NDC is probably the future in terms of where people are going. I think 68% of airlines said that they're going to use or intend to use NDC in the next couple of years for their retail and distribution strategies. And that's taking control. That's taking control of their inventory. That's but that's expanding it as well. So you're looking at how the airline is going to expand their portfolio. Rather than just offering the ticket, you can start offering more than the journey. So, you know, things along the lines of baggage, hotel, car hire can all be under the control of the airline. And I think that is where the airlines are starting to look to see if they can take that control back in with themselves. But even then, you're going to use technology from various different vendors, even if you do it yourself.
Yeah, but there's also this fear from airlines, not just African airlines, but airlines globally, that the likes of Google, Amazon are likely to get into the distribution space and take charge of their industry. And in these days where data is the new gold, benefit from that data rather than allow airlines to benefit. How close are we to that really?
I think we might be fairly close. I think, you know, the likes of Amazon and the likes of Google would be looking at it. You know, if you get the airline industry right, it's a very profitable area. But I think their knowledge and understanding of the airlines, it takes time. I mean, most of the vendors that provide to the airlines have been working in the industries for 30, 35 years. Yes, Google and Amazon will have the technology, but the resources and the knowledge will need to be built up. And I think, you know, a lot of the information that would be used, the airlines already have within their systems. So it's a case of utilizing that data rather than starting a whole different stream with the likes of Amazon and Google. Raphael, you're on mute.
Sorry, investments in technology is a big challenge for the African airlines, but they need it also to compete or even collaborate and bring down their cost. Are some of the technology solution providers able to partner with airlines by allowing them access to technology that they can pay back over time? In other words, can they have access to technology that they can use and pay for later?
Yeah, and I think that's what most vendors do. I think, you know, they will always look to do long contracts with the airlines, primarily for two reasons, because you can spread the cost over the time. But more importantly is to partner with the airline to ensure that the systems that they're using and they take on board are something that evolves with the customer, with the airline. Yes, there is always initial upfront costs involved, but I think, you know, you can start looking at the technologies that are out there. Most products and most vendors will provide even a 5-10 year contract, and that spreads the cost over the time. What we have seen in the last couple of years is airlines asking for lower upfront costs and, you know, and having a higher yearly cost. It is something that people, well, the vendors will look at for sure.
As the industry recover now, are there any ways airlines can actually use technology, one, to attract more traffic to themselves than they were doing before? Are there technologies that airlines can actually use to improve their numbers, their yields?
Yeah, and that comes down to having a very good route structure. You need to have you know, very good improving connections, you know, making sure you have the right route management. there is tools out there for business intelligence tools that tell you which customers to target, but it comes back to getting closer to the customer. So having the data and the dynamic ability to flexibly meet their needs and to be able to be flexible enough to change. And I think that's where, you know, the likes of NDC is coming into fore in that it allows the airlines to have the direct link with the customers. Obviously with loyalty products as well, you have that side of things. But it's all coming down to the relationship and the direct relationship between the airline and the customer, and understanding where those needs are met. And you know, if you're looking in Africa, the issue has always been about connection. I mean, you start looking in Europe, there's huge amounts of connection. So the passengers are there. It's about getting the routes set up correctly. So the technology is there to allow the airlines to manipulate the data to see what is available. There's lots of vendors that provide that information. But the important thing is obviously to be able to, I think in the future, to be able to do dynamic offers. So to be able to provide the customer with the option or the choice. And I think if we focus on Africa in that respect, the issue that you have is you don't have the huge amount of connections in the region. And that's coming back to the SATAM issues. You know, there's only 13 countries that have direct connections with everyone else. So the connections need to improve in that area. Otherwise, you're going to see the likes of Qatar and Turkish, who are investing heavily in Africa, creating hubs in Istanbul and Doha, allowing passengers to travel. I mean, one of the last trips I did before COVID, I was traveling within Africa and I had to go via Doha to get to the destination, which seemed very strange.
Yeah, I thought that has ceased. I knew that used to happen in the past. Probably that is actually being reintroduced because of the
with the code, yeah.
But we hoping that as the industry picks back, Africa will refill back the space and reassert its dominance of the African market, especially taking advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Yes.
And the single air transport market. I think these two projects are actually the hope for Africa in actually clawing back some lost traffic and improving their activities. Now, you've always talked about loyalty and ensuring that airlines earn the loyalty of customers. And I just want to find out from you. I know as Aselia, you have been involved in Africa for many years, and you have a lot of clients on the African continent here. Just tell us briefly about Aselia and what you actually do for the African continent.
Accelya in Africa. I mean, obviously, okay. So we have a huge number of customers in Africa. I mean, obviously, I would say that nearly every African carrier is a customer of ours at some point or in some area. Primarily in the credit card centralization that we have. We have a huge footprint in that area within Africa. Revenue accounting, we provide over 10 airlines in Africa with our revenue accounting solution, primarily outsourced and BPO. So we've always had a very strong relationship with these carriers, in particular increasing now in our revenue management and revenue integrity systems that we have brought on board in the last 2 or 4 years. We have a strong revenue insurance team that provide a lot of checks to the African carriers. We're finding about $3 to $4 million a year in Africa in fraud and mistakes, I should say. And then we also provide direct operating cost checks, which is very important in terms of the fuel and the routes and the carriers around around Africa, especially with the high fuel costs in Africa. So I mean, at the moment we see that there's about 0.5% of recoveries for all DOCs for airlines operating in the region. So it's a huge saving for them. As well as that, we have a number of markets intelligence tools that we provide the airlines. One of them is being used heavily now for the growth within after COVID, which is in partnership with IATA, which is the GNR5, which allows the incentives to be paid directly to the agents. And it's a huge benefit to help the business grow quickly. And it's been used across the whole of Africa, in particular for airlines trying to get a grip of the Middle Eastern and European routes.
Wow. But you're doing you're in revenue management and revenue integrity. It's a core area, a big leakage area for African airlines revenues. They either losing revenues because they don't have the systems, or they don't have the right advice, or a combination of both. And even though you said you're all over the continent, there's still a lot that you have to do.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's over 200 carriers in Africa. I think, you know, if you're looking at that, we have a long way to go to reach all of them. But we have a very good footprint in Africa in helping the carriers to achieve, you know, profitability, hopefully. But yes, I think we have a very good core group of airlines that use our systems, and they, as we strongly believe in the partnership approach. The majority of them have been our partners for well over 10, 15 years.
Great. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just put your questions on the Q&A tab, and if there are comments, please put them in the chat box, and I will pick them up shortly. I see there are some comments coming in. I will soon get to address them. Now, Roger, on fraud, again, another big area of contention for African airlines. They're losing a lot of revenue through all sorts of means, credit card fraud, now online electronic payment frauds, and now we have mobile payment frauds coming in. How are you assisting your clients deal with issues of fraud on the continent?
We don't get involved in that side of, I mean, on the credit card side, we have a strong check with the credit cards that come through our system. So there is a check against the blacklists, etc. But it's not an area that we specialize in, Rafael. We primarily looking for on the fraud side. We look at revenue assurance. So how the travel agents potentially could be being fraudulent to the airlines. So we're checking on that side of things. But like you said, fraud within mobile payments is huge, and it has to be controlled considerably. But at the moment, it's not something that we deal with.
The other area Aselia is very strong is in the area of market intelligence tools.
Yes.
And one of the biggest weakness of African airlines is also tools for market intelligence. How successful have you been in supporting African airlines with market intelligence tools?
Well, we provide a market intelligence tool. It's the eSmash product that a lot of the African carriers are using. It primarily uses the BSP data, so it is very focused on the BSP side of things. It is something that is used by the commercial teams within the regions to see where they can target the travel agents, and they can also use it in partnership. It has a very strong link with the GNR5 tool, so you can almost instantly incentivize agents from the tool, which is hugely beneficial to carriers that don't have huge marketing or sales teams. It enables them to be very dynamic in how they offer their discounts and their incentives to the agents. But it also highlights the agents where there is potential growth and potential profitability for them. So it's been used considerably. I think the top 3 carriers in Africa certainly use it, and a lot of the other ones use it in different parts of the world.
Good. Talking about the travel agents, I have a very interesting question coming from Agnes Mucha. Sorry, it's Mukuha. Agnes is asking, how do you envision the role of travel agents evolving with the deployment of NDC in a market where over 75% passenger number bookings are sold through travel agents?
Yeah, I think travel agents are very important. I think travel agents will always be around. I think they will be involved in the NDC process. The key thing here is that they have their own special relationship with the passengers. What you're looking at here is the airlines increasing their direct sales to some of their customers. The travel agents will still be able to access the NDC part of the airline to be able to create their own deals and offer in order to the final customer. I think travel agents will start being used more. Obviously, business TMCs, the business travel agency, are very important from that aspect because they combine a lot of different things within the offer that they provide to the customer. So I think the NDC will impact the travel agents. I think there will be a shift of some of the passengers to it, but I think that travel agents will remain a very important part of the process.
Okay, so travel agents need not worry that with NDC they risk disappearance. They can rest assured that there's more room for them going forward.
I think there will always be room for. I mean, you look at the general public. Not all of them want to deal directly with the airlines. They feel more comfortable with the agents, especially when it starts getting more complex, with the airlines offering more services, hotel, car hire, all bundled into one. You know, I think there will be a place. I think there will be an increase in NDC. I mean, last year we certainly saw NDC become mainstream. I think if I look, I think we saw about a 73% increase in the number of tickets sold through the NDC channel. So compared to 2019, so there has been an increase, yes. But I think there will still be a place for travel agents. That's my personal opinion.
That's right. That's very encouraging, Agnes. So you have it. There's room for travel agents. You just probably need to rethink your business module and align it properly, and there will definitely be a market for you to still occupy and save. Now, tell me, Acelia's successes in Africa, what would you say they have been? How would you quantify your successes in Africa?
Our successes, well, we went through the products that we were selling there. You know, the revenue assurance we're offering the airlines. We're finding the $3 to $4 million a year. We have a huge relationship under the revenue accounting. And you know, now we're looking at particular in terms of, you know, cargo. It's another part that we're offering the airlines. That's something that we're now starting to see a huge increase in in demand within Africa. I think cargo has certainly had an increase in demand over the last 2 years. I think a lot of airlines suddenly saw cargo as a way of continuing to fly, even to the point where I think I was surprised to see Jambo Jet starting a cargo product which is unusual for a low-cost carrier to offer that service. But it's an interesting one, and it's something that is definitely something that we will be looking at, especially around Africa.
Yeah, cargo is actually the has emerged since COVID as the area that airlines had forgotten about, but where they ought to be several years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
All airlines are awakened to that reality, but in the panic, I'm not too sure if airlines are getting it right. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on the airline, to be honest. If you take the likes of Ethiopian, I think they've got it right. They have a very, very good cargo operational system in Addis Ababa. They have a fantastic network. And the other carriers are also Kenya Airways, even are all starting to, well, they all have a very good cargo product. The thing with cargo is primarily to get the technology correct, and we're back to technology in this respect. Cargo has always been slightly behind in its technology because it's just dealing with cargo rather than passengers. It's a little bit more complex, so the technology needs to be a bit more advanced. But now with the new trends in cargo, I think the tools are there, and the African carriers are starting to see them.
And is Aselia currently helping some African airlines, new African airlines, beyond your traditional customers? Are you involved with some African airlines, assisting them with cargo development?
We have a few airlines in Africa that we help with cargo. We have some cargo revenue accounting customers. So we do the revenue accounting, which is part of our passenger and cargo revenue accounting systems. But we also have an operations tool. I don't think we have any in Africa at the moment, but it is something that is being looked at by a number of carriers.
Oh, great. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're still waiting for more questions, comments to come in. So if you have these comments or questions, please post them, and we will deal with them shortly. We're running out of time, and I'm just waiting to get your comments. Otherwise, we would continue with our discussions until the end. So now tell me, you've told me about your successes on the continent. What are your challenges? What keeps you awake at night as Regional Service Director for Africa?
I mean, outside of the common issues, obviously the political interference in the airline's business strategy is always an interesting one in certain parts of Africa. We have the huge distances we need to cover. I mean, I'm based in the UK. We don't currently actually have any offices. Oh, so I stand corrected. We have one office in Tunis. But when I go to visit my customers, it's all huge distances to travel. So that's why I think we find the partnerships along the lines of Afra very, very useful and a benefit, because it gives us an insight into what's happening locally. A number of the African governments, they tend to view the aviation as a luxury rather than a necessity. So the infrastructure is either too much or not enough. So sometimes that's a challenge in the area. I guess decision making can also be a challenge in the region. There's a lot of politics that get involved in it. but bear in mind, we generally have a very good working relationship with all the carriers. So the challenges are few and far between, I would say. I think you're on mute again. Apologies, Rafael.
No, sorry about that. I just think that was an interesting perspective, that you actually have some issues that keep you awake at night, and I always say that those are what also keeps us in jobs. If there are no challenges, nobody needs your employment or your skills.
Exactly.
At this point, let me go to our Q&A box and then pick up a few issues. Sege Gatoi says that there's this argument that the GDSs are the ones that make all the money and not the airlines. What are your views? Is that true?
You're asking me to speak ill of my competitors.
No, I'm not saying you speak ill of them. Whether that's true or not, a simple yes is true, a simple no is not true.
I don't think it's true. No, I mean, obviously GDSs are a company and they need to make profit, so they do make profit by and whole. But they have also invested hugely in the infrastructure of providing the ticketing systems to the airlines. Yes, to a degree, you are correct in saying that the GDSs will make profit, but the airlines for the last 3 or 4 years haven't. But if you look at other parts of the world, the airlines are making huge profits and they are still using the same GDS system. So it's not all about using the system, and that means that you are making a loss.
Yeah. I'm talking about GDSs. What is the future of GDSs in this fast-paced technology environment?
Well, we're seeing now that the GDSs are investing heavily in the new technology, and they have their own NDC products that they are moving forward with. I think the GDSs have some very interesting decisions ahead in the future. But I think that they will be around, and I think they'll certainly be part of the infrastructure for a while.
Yeah, so they're here to stay, and they're just adapting their business model to suit the circumstances.
Exactly. So they're adapting to the current trends, like all businesses that obviously have senior managers that they need to.
Yeah. Thanks. Now, another question, this one from Agnes again. Agnes says, do you view airlines as technology companies offering connectivity that enables trade and travel? Or do you view them as symbols of national pride that are tightly protected by governments? This is a political question, Agnes, but yeah.
I think it depends on how the airline is structured. There are airlines out there that are very, excuse me, government owned and controlled, that are seen as a national pride. But the majority of the airlines now, I think, are independent and have a lot of investment to do, and obviously are technology users. Some of them are technology companies. Some of the airlines have huge IT resources and spend a huge amount on setting up their own infrastructures and IT solutions, whereas others utilize technologies from those carriers as well as from other vendors. So I think the answer is that there is both in the world.
Oh, interesting. So it's both worlds. Yeah. Another question, this one from Dahir Mohammed, all the way from New York, USA. It says, USA and EU need to pick up our African investments. What suggestions do you have in shifting the paradigm and utilizing the millions of African aviators that can contribute to the world's labor shortage crisis. In other words, do you have any thoughts on how the excess, youthful, well-educated labor force in Africa can be effectively harnessed and used in the Western world? I think that's sort of the question.
I think they already are. I think, you know, you look at a lot of the airlines. When I was in the Middle East, there was a lot of the people that I dealt with were from Africa. So I think the carriers around the world, they employ the best people for the job. If they happen to be from Africa, then that's great. My suggestion would be for the African carriers to try and keep the best resources at home, and to build their own carriers to challenge the rest of the world.
I agree with you very much that we need the best resources back home, so that we can grow our aviation industry and be more effective in our competition.
Absolutely.
Now, another question, this one from Mbali. It says, with cargo starting to pick up, do you think there is potential for new entrants in the cargo space? Do you see potential for new cargo airlines in Africa?
I think yes. I mean, as long as the demand is there. I think the demand has been there for the last 2 years. It's whether the existing carriers pick up the slack there, or if, you know, obviously if the demand is there, then absolutely there's space for a new cargo setup. The only thing that with any sort of new airline is the initial cost up front is high. The cost of the planes, the cost of, you know, the licenses, etc., is significant. So as long as there's a good business model and you have the demand, then yes, there's always scope for new carriers.
Now, another question from John Howard. He says the impact on jet fuel price is a huge concern. 70 barrels in December, now $110 a barrel and rising. Now, do you think the crisis happening in Russia and that region are likely to further exacerbate this situation?
Absolutely. You know, it can't not. The cost of fuel is rising, which has a direct impact. I mean, I off the top of my head, I don't know, but there's a high percentage of an airline's cost is fuel based. So any sort of changes and increases can only impact the bottom line of an airline. What we would probably start seeing is obviously ticket prices going up, which obviously then has an impact on passengers flying. So yeah, I think the impact of the conflict in Ukraine is going to have a knock-on effect on fuel, and that will have a direct knock-on effect to the airlines.
Now, having ticket prices beginning going up at the time when all the industry is trying to whip up interest and enthusiasm, travel again, that's going now to have a much bigger impact on airlines across the world. Yeah,
and this is, I guess, where it's not in my area of expertise, but you know, the airlines that have hedged their fuel potentially could come out of this in a much stronger position. But I'm not sure if there's much of that been going on in the last 2 years. So I think it'll be a huge impact for the carriers, and in particular the long haul carriers, where the fuel is even a bigger portion of their costs.
Yeah, particularly in Africa, any slight increase in fuel price just escalates the price several fold on the continent, and
well, the issue
is
is
afraid for our alien airlines.
yeah, the issue has always been also is that fuel costs in Africa are 20–30% higher than the rest of the world. So, you know, that has a double impact for you, for Africa.
So not easy at all.
No.
I cannot let you go without asking you this question. There definitely was a good reason why Aselia decided to partner AFRA. How is the partnership between Aselia and AFRA positively impacting airlines on the continent, specifically AFRA member airlines?
Well, I think our partnership with AFRA is hugely important. It provides a key information and a direct link to the African carriers. For us, we rely on you to see the trends in Africa, helping Accelya understand the key areas of concern in the aviation industry. So it sort of helps with us when we're looking at where we need to invest in our technology, how we can look at areas of improvement, or as well as, you know, new businesses, new avenues of investment within the airline. Obviously with AFRA, the leadership, we organize webinars around new technology so we can expose the carriers to what's happening globally around the world, opening up, you know, retailing focuses and different areas that we would work with the African carriers on. So I think, you know, it's very important that to us, as well as to the airlines, to have the relationship with Accelya and AFRA.
Thank you. Another question from Sege Gatoyi. Do you agree on, I think this question we've dealt with earlier, and when John Howell asked his question, Ukraine crisis, I think that's it. We will not go back there. Thank you very much, Sege, but I think the question has already been answered. Now let's take a question from Alfred Mwalili. Alfred says, does Aselia work with smaller airlines or LCCs outside of BSP for revenue collection? And is there a future in collaborating with such airlines? For example, about 5 airlines operating outside of Wilson Airport and do not share documents, but this could be a window. Do you smaller airlines outside BSP environment?
We work heavily with the LCCs. Yeah, I mean, obviously we have a good relationship with a number of them around the world. Revenue collection for the smaller carriers, I mean, LCC generally doesn't have a big problem with revenue collection because there's no refunds on LCCs. There's not a huge amount of complexity on the ticketing. There is a couple globally that we do work with. But for the smaller carriers, you know, the airlines operating out of Wilson Airport, we've spoken to a few of them around revenue integrity, but not so much about revenue collection. Obviously, without documents or the data to do the checks on, it's very difficult to do that. But it's certainly something we can discuss.
Okay. Now, Dahir has a follow-up question for you. He says, well, the Middle East has utilized labor from Africa greatly, but do you see a potential for similar utilization of labor from Africa in the EU and US?
I haven't seen it myself, but that's not to say it's not there. I think, you know, the labor resources will come down primarily in the US is more about being allowed to work in the US, having the green card. So that's more of a political question rather than the airlines employing staff.
Thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of our question session. Now, I cannot let you go, even though our time is up, without asking you for your final thoughts. Any key messages for the African airline industry, for your listeners, and for aviation in Africa, please?
I mean, all I would say is, I mean, look, we're a partner. We look to ensure that the services we provide fit the needs of our customers. And this is shown with the retention of our customers over the years. With the merger with Farelogix a couple of years ago, Accelya now has a complete end-to-end offering to the airlines for all their needs. And this we see as a massive advantage to the industry as we look to expand our presence around the globe. We believe technology will play a key role in supporting the recovery of travel in Africa and elsewhere. It will also allow the airlines to enhance the customer experience, especially within Africa, that has the youngest population in the world, but the highest use of mobiles. So the direct access between airlines and their passengers is more prevalent in Africa. I mean, taking control is easier than you think. I mean, the path is clear and the journey can always be fun, and most importantly, profitable. The key is to invest in technology and ensure Africa is ready for the growth that is sure to come. We see Africa as a hugely potential growth region over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, I think we'll bring the curtain down at this point, and I want to thank you very much, Roger, for your time and for educating us on this today on this subject. Thank you very much, all my audience, for taking time off your busy schedules to join us today for this session. We look forward to having you again on our next session next month, when we hope to be discussing matters pertaining to the single African air transport market with a high-profile personality on the African continent. Until then, thank you very much, all of you, for your time and for your patience. Thanks for all those who asked questions or made comments. We really appreciate and value your contributions, and we look forward to having you again next month during the similar time. Thank you very much, and you have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rafa. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.